If you have ever bought a car on finance, there's a good chance you were robbed and never knew it. For over a decade, the dealer you trusted to get you a fair loan was secretly doing the opposite, jacking up your interest rate so he could pocket a bigger hidden kickback. The more he overcharged you, the more he got paid. It happened on nearly 15 million car deals, and the bill has now hit £9 billion. Millions of people are owed a refund right now and have no idea. So how did an entire industry rob you in plain sight? And are you one of them? Make sure you subscribe, because I started this channel for one reason: to share what dealerships and car makers don't want you to hear. With your support, I can keep making these videos. Now let's get into it. Let's start with the sheer staggering size of this thing, because it is honestly hard to even wrap your head around. In the United Kingdom, regulators have uncovered that a huge chunk of the car finance deals sold over the last decade and a half were missold. And when I say a huge chunk, I really mean it. We are talking about around 14.2 million individual finance agreements, which works out to roughly 44%, very nearly half of every single car finance deal made in the entire country since 2007. Stop and think about that for a second. If you bought a car on finance in Britain at any point in the last 15 years, there is close to a coin flip chance that you personally were one of the people caught up in this. And the bill for it is absolutely enormous. The lenders have now been ordered to pay out around £9 billion in compensation to the very people they overcharged. £9 billion. This is not some small technical error that clipped a handful of unlucky buyers. This is one of the single largest consumer scandals in modern British history, sitting right up there with the biggest banking scandals the country has ever seen. And the refunds are only just beginning to flow. Millions of completely ordinary people who genuinely thought they simply bought a car years ago and moved on with their lives are now finding out they are owed money back, sometimes hundreds of pounds and sometimes a great deal more than that. So the obvious question hanging over all of it is this: how on earth did this happen to so many people for so long without anyone really noticing? And the answer is the part that should truly make your blood boil, because it was not some accident. It was designed to work exactly this way. Here is precisely how the whole scam worked, and once you understand it, I promise you will never look at a car dealership the same way again. When you walk into a dealership and agree to buy a car on finance, you naturally assume the salesman is there to help you find a good loan. You trust him to get you a fair interest rate, because that is supposedly what he is there for, right? Wrong. For years in Britain, the entire system was quietly rigged in a way that almost no buyer even knew existed. The dealer himself was secretly allowed to set your interest rate. Not the bank, the dealer. And here is the poison sitting right at the center of it all. The higher the interest rate the dealer chose to charge you, the bigger the secret commission the lender turned around and paid that dealer. Read that one more time, slowly. The more they overcharged you, the more money they personally pocketed for themselves. So the friendly salesman sitting across that desk, the very one you trusted to look after you, was being financially rewarded for jacking your interest rate up as high as he could possibly get away with. Every extra pound of interest you paid, month after month, year after year, was quietly padding his own pocket, and you had absolutely no idea any of it was happening. This grubby little arrangement even had its own polite name. They called it a discretionary commission arrangement, a nice, boring, technical-sounding phrase for what was really nothing more than a license to legally overcharge you and quietly keep the difference. And it was absolutely everywhere. This was not one rogue dealer in one bad town. This was the standard, accepted way the entire industry did business for well over a decade on millions upon millions of cars. The people who were supposed to be helping you get into a car were actually being paid to make that car cost you as much as they possibly could. That is the genuinely shocking reason behind this whole refund explosion. You were never really the customer. You were the target. And the cruelest part of the entire thing is just how completely invisible it all was, because that commission was deliberately hidden. You never once saw it. There was no line printed on the paperwork that said, by the way, your interest rate is higher than it needs to be so that the dealer collects a fatter bonus. You just signed exactly where they told you to sign, drove off feeling happy, and then spent the next 3, 4, or 5 years paying far more than you ever should have, every single month, without the faintest clue. And these were not tiny, trivial amounts of money either. Over the full life of a typical car loan, being quietly pushed onto a higher interest rate could easily cost you hundreds, or even well over £1,000 in completely unnecessary extra interest. For a great many families, that is very real money. Money that was quietly siphoned straight out of their pockets and handed to a salesman for doing nothing more than typing a slightly bigger number into a computer screen. And think about who this whole scheme hit the very hardest. It was so often the people with the least to spare, the ones who could not afford to pay cash and had no choice but to rely on finance, the ones least able to shop around or spot a bad deal in the first place. They were the easiest targets of all, and the industry treated them exactly like targets. That is what makes the whole thing so genuinely infuriating. It was not a mistake, and it was not bad luck. It was a deliberate, industry-wide system, carefully designed to squeeze extra money out of ordinary people who simply trusted the person selling them a car. And for well over 10 years, it worked absolutely perfectly, right up until the moment it finally got dragged out into the light. And dragging it out into the light took nothing less than the highest court in the entire land. In August of 2025, after years and years of complaints and grinding legal battles, the United Kingdom Supreme Court finally delivered a ruling that changed everything overnight. It found that hiding these commissions from buyers and failing to properly tell people what was actually going on behind the scenes could be unfair and therefore unlawful. And that single ruling blew the floodgates wide open. Suddenly, the country's financial regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, had no choice at all but to act. It set up a formal compensation scheme, an entire system built to force the lenders to pay people back for everything they had been overcharged. And the numbers involved are simply massive. On average, people are expected to get back somewhere around £829 for each agreement, with most individual payouts landing under £950, though plenty of people who were hit far harder or who took out several car loans over the years could easily be owed a great deal more than that. Now multiply a few £100s by more than 14 million agreements, and you arrive right back at that staggering £9 billion bill. For the ordinary British driver, this is a rare and genuine victory. After years of being quietly fleeced at the finance desk, the little guy is finally getting his own money back, and the enormous lenders are being forced to hand it over. And you do not even need to have kept a shred of the original paperwork to be in line for it. If you financed a car through a dealer in those years, the whole system is being set up to comb through your old agreements and check them for you. Millions of people who have long since forgotten every detail of a car loan they took out years ago are now about to receive a letter that could be quietly worth real money. It should be a simple, straightforward, happy ending to the story. But of course, it is nothing of the sort, because the very moment that bill actually came due, the industry did precisely what you would expect it to do. It started fighting tooth and nail to avoid paying a single penny. Because that is the part they really do not want you focusing on. Even now, with the entire scandal fully exposed and the compensation officially ordered, the finance companies are scrambling desperately to wriggle their way out of paying you back. The whole scheme has been hit with a wave of legal challenges, and just look closely at exactly who is doing the challenging. The finance arms of some of the biggest names in the entire car world, including the likes of Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz, right alongside other major lenders, have all launched legal challenges against the compensation scheme itself. Think about the sheer breathtaking nerve of that for a moment. They ran a system that quietly overcharged millions of people for well over a decade. They finally got caught red-handed. They were told plainly to pay it all back. And their response is to lawyer up and fight to keep the money anyway. And it is working, at least for now. Because of all these legal challenges, the entire thing has been dragged out and delayed. The lenders have been told they do not even have to calculate, let alone pay out, a single penny until these legal challenges have been properly heard, and that hearing is not even expected until late 2026, or possibly even early 2027, with the final judgment landing months after that. So the very people who were robbed in the first place are now being told to wait, yet again, while the exact companies that robbed them make one last desperate attempt to hold onto the cash. Here is my honest opinion on all of it. That single fact tells you absolutely everything about how these companies genuinely see you. Not as a valued customer to be served, but purely as a source of money to be squeezed, right up until the very last possible second, even after they have already been caught in the act. But this whole finance scandal is still only one half of the reason British drivers are now sending things back and loudly demanding their money. The other half is about the cars themselves. Because at the very same time all of this was blowing up, more and more Britons started fighting back hard on a completely separate second front by rejecting faulty cars outright and demanding full refunds for them. And here in the UK, the law is genuinely on the buyer's side in a way that a surprising number of people simply do not realize. Under something called the Consumer Rights Act, if you buy a car and a serious fault shows up within the very first 30 days, you have the outright legal right to hand it straight back and get a full refund, no arguments and no haggling. And even within the first 6 months, if a fault appears and they cannot manage to fix it, you can then demand your money back or a proper price cut. And as modern cars have become vastly more complicated, stuffed to the roof with glitchy electronics and unproven new technology, more and more people have started actually using that right. Buyers who spent good, hard-earned money on a brand new car, only to be plagued by fault after fault, are increasingly refusing to just quietly put up with it. They are formally rejecting the car, getting their full cash back, and simply walking away from the whole mess. Picture a family who saved up for years to finally buy their very first brand new car, an electric one, only to have it break down again and again in the first few weeks, leaving them stranded and absolutely furious. Under the old way of thinking, they would have been completely stuck, entirely at the mercy of the dealer's goodwill. Now, they simply invoke the law, hand the keys straight back, and by that same law, the refund has to land back in their account, very often within a couple of weeks. No begging, no fighting, no drawn-out battle, just their money back. And word of that spreads incredibly fast between neighbors and coworkers. And the more people who learn they actually have that kind of power, the more of them start using it. So what you have now is this genuinely remarkable double movement, all happening at exactly the same time. On the one side, millions of drivers reclaiming billions of pounds in missold finance. And on the other side, a rising tide of fed-up buyers physically sending faulty cars straight back and demanding refunds. After years and years of being stuck on the losing end of every single deal, the ordinary British car buyer has finally figured out how to fight back and how to actually win. And that, when you really think about it, is a far bigger story than it first appears to be. Because here is what all of this really means, and it is so much bigger than any single scandal. For years and years, the car industry treated the ordinary buyer as little more than a mark, to be squeezed at every single stage of the deal. They inflated the sticker price of the car itself. They loaded it up with subscriptions and fees. And then, as if all of that were not already enough, they secretly overcharged you on the very loan you needed just to pay for the thing, and quietly pocketed the difference. Every single step of the journey, from the moment you first walked into that showroom to the moment you made your very last payment, was carefully engineered to extract more money out of you than it ever honestly should have. And for a very long time, buyers simply accepted it because they did not know any better, and because it genuinely felt like there was nothing they could possibly do about it. Well, that entire era is now finally ending. What we are all watching unfold in Britain right now is the ordinary buyer waking up, learning his actual rights, and dramatically turning the tables. £9 billion clawed straight back, millions upon millions of refunds, faulty cars sent back by the thousands. This is exactly what it looks like when the little guy finally stops blindly trusting the smile across the desk and starts actually reading the fine print. And the industry is genuinely terrified of it because their entire profit machine was quietly built on you not paying attention. The very moment that you do start paying attention, the whole thing begins to fall apart. And the British driver just proved, beyond any doubt, that it can be done. And that should make every single car buyer, everywhere on earth, sit straight up and take notice. And yes, that absolutely includes you, wherever in the world you happen to be watching this from. Because make no mistake about it, this is nowhere near just a British problem. The very same grubby tricks are used all over the world, very much including in America, where dealers routinely mark up your interest rate and quietly pocket the difference, in a practice most buyers have honestly never even heard of. The names are a little different, and the laws are a little different, but the underlying game is absolutely identical. Somebody, somewhere, is quietly making money off the simple fact that you trust them and that you are not checking. So here is the real, lasting lesson buried in this whole saga. The friendly person selling you a car is not actually your friend, and the very moment that finance enters the conversation, you should assume that every single number glowing on that screen is negotiable, and that somebody is being paid based on exactly how much you agree to. Check the interest rate yourself. Shop the loan somewhere else entirely before you ever set foot inside that dealership. And genuinely know your rights, because the law almost certainly gives you far more power than the industry ever wants you to realize you have. The British are proving right now, in real time, that when buyers finally push back together, they can claw billions of pounds straight back out of an industry that arrogantly assumed it would never once have to answer for any of it. The only real question left is how long it takes the rest of us to finally do the exact same thing. Because that refund explosion in Britain did not happen because the system suddenly decided to become fair. It happened because ordinary people finally, at long last, stopped trusting it. The court hearing that decides exactly when all of those billions actually get paid out is set to land in late 2026, and the lenders are throwing absolutely everything they have at delaying it even further. Subscribe so you know the very moment that money starts flowing and whether this same overdue reckoning is finally coming for the rest of us too.